Welcome to Wellness Radio with Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher as your host. Her show discusses topics of health, wellness, and spirituality, and is about discovering your place in this great universe, from your cells to the cosmos. Along with her guest, in casual conversation, she strives to ask the difficult questions that may be holding you back from a vibrant life, and shares new ideas that may inspire you to make a change in your life that you only can see in your dreams. And now, here is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wellness Radio. This is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher, and it's a pleasure to have you with us this evening. Tonight, we are going to be talking about how to mesh our spiritual journey, our ascension, expanded consciousness, with the human story in which we are in. How do we see things play out each day, see its importance, perhaps know what questions to ask, and maybe say, oh, this is awesome. I didn't know what the flip of the coin, the other side of the story, was really telling me about. Do we need to wait decades to be able to look at experiences in our lifetime and say, let's look back in retrospect with those pretty rose-colored glasses and see what it was all about? Perhaps we can even do it within the story, within the framework, within the experience, to take our emotions and feelings and perhaps maybe say, oh, I too can take my energy, I can flip it and say, I see it. Then we have a little bit less grief, less pain, less carrying on to the tethers, and feeling like we are chained down to a story of our existence that really wasn't ours in the first place. It was just something we were meant to be able to move through and see what this world is all about. Today, my guest is Thomas Lane. His book is The Karma Factor, and exactly what this book is about, spiritual growth and the soul pathway. And it's really about still asking the questions, and I think it's also a melting pot, because it kind of brings all the principles together in a human story so you can understand it and say, is that what that looks like from the other side? Because I've had something like that before. I just didn't know what to call it, how to classify it, or how to see it in different eyes. Thomas, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great. It's great just listening to that intro there. Very interesting.
So glad to have you, Thomas. I think this is the perfect day to be able to sit back and look at your book, The Karma Factor, because we are calling it a summer read for the year 2023. I truly think that many people are saying, I kind of know something's going on in my life. I'm trying to check it out. Looking at all of these things, people are talking about spirituality and soul, but I don't know how it fits into my normal life. Don't you think your book, The Karma Factor, is a very good tool to start with?
For me, yeah, it's layered in that sense. I'll use that word because I love both detective stories, and I also have spent a lot of time in the other realms, spiritual and nameless ones, and that part of what drives me is the connection between the two and an oversight viewpoint that includes both the hardship and also the beauty and the wisdom on the other side. And so putting them together and making a story entertaining and challenging and page-turner, but also having these elements of wisdom from another time and place that is watching what's going on and trying to orchestrate a change of consciousness that's embodied in the cop and robber thing. Anyway, if that makes sense, it was exciting for me to write it because I didn't know when and how I was going to bring those elements in. And just, when I hit a place where something called for a bigger reach, a bigger expansion of possibilities, this other story came in. And that's how that worked.
I think it's really awesome to be able to join those two sides together. Many people are thinking, with this ascension, we're coming to the point where we're all going to be wearing white and Birkenstocks. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
We're all going to be good people, and there's going to be glitter circling around our head. And it's sort of like, maybe not. But yet others will think of, we'll be stuck in the lower vibrations, and our world will be terrible, we'll be killing each other, and, there'll never be any fresh water. Mm-hmm. So I think the idea is, perhaps, now at this year, 2023, what we're really seeing is not a splitting of the people, but perhaps we're seeing that we now have full range of the paradigm, good, bad, ugly, white, dark, light. And we're feeling it all for what it is.
Yes.
Do you think perhaps what that is about?
I totally agree with that, because it's been labeled, a time of the big lie. But for me, it's also a time for the big truth. And these various problematic areas for us, particularly getting along with someone from a different tribe, has always been there. But because of major forces at play, including internet and global warming and all these various things, have pushed us together in such a way that we can't just back off behind a mountain range and not talk to these other people. We're all in this together now. And so, time of crisis is a time of opportunity, and it's a huge opportunity for us to climb up. Einstein said, you can't solve a problem from the same state in which you created the problem. So, and I know there's many people like you, Dr. Jeanette, and like so many people I've talked to and that I'm watching, that are looking for that other place from which to view and from which to act, that will, knit this stuff together in a way that we can have longevity and peace and whatever. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe 100 years from now. But by viewing the possibilities, it opens up the pathways.
Right. I think also, too, the idea about the word longevity, a lot of people are saying, I need an anti-aging this, I need that. I have to make sure my checklist and bucket list are all done before I move on or whatever. Or, you better make sure you do all this, or your karma's going to get you next time. It's going to bite you in the butt, and you'll have to, you'll go through that door in your next lifetime, and it'll be stuck to you. When in essence, none of that is true.
Right. It's only true if you decide it's true.
Right, but also, too, the idea is that when a soul goes, it may take fragments that are there, but it's not about bringing the entire human story log with you. You do not carry baggage of this lifetime through the door. I've worked so much with patients at end of life, and it's when you're at that door, it's like, honey, you can't take it with you. Whatever it is, you can let it go right here. And sometimes it's put a glass of water next to your bed and say, whatever it is, let it go in there, because I cannot take it with me. And then patients will die pretty quickly. They'll say, I'm good, I'll let it go.
Oh, that's
but many
beautiful.
times, so many times people will say, but it's a secret, it's a story, it's shame, it's guilt, it's pain. We've all heard all of those. And I said, that's a word. And even the story of my son, tried to commit suicide over 13 times. Wow. The last time I said to him, I said, go in a room and ask, you and your counselor, go in there and welcome in fear. Ask it what it's about. What is it doing? How big is it? What does it look like? What is it about? After that time, he stopped. Because I think it's all words in our head and our mind.
Storylines.
That we've created it, yes. Don't you think?
I do. And just while you were talking about that, there's a perception that I have come to, which is, it's not the glass half full, half empty. It's the fact that there's a glass period. That is the miracle. And the fact that I feel there's a kind of native state that you can strip down to if you do the work and do the opening. And that has a lot to do with the experience, the visceral experience, not mental, that we're walking around in a miracle. The fact that there is this thing called life, that we do have hands and feet and sensation. And that is if one can go there, then I think you leave all the baggage and stuff behind anyway, because there's nothing attached to that perception. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right, yeah. Yeah. You know, I think also, too, the idea about eternal soul. If we can think about ourselves as eternal souls, this human story, it's just a chapter in my book. I'm not connected. I don't fear death. Okay, it's today or tomorrow or whatever. It just doesn't even attach to me, that story, anymore. Right. You know, I can remember my website person. She said to me several years ago, you have to write your bio. And, you know, I wrote the words I am and could never get past that. And still to this
That's
day.
That's what I was saying, yeah.
Right. Still to this day, I still don't have a bio. And it's sort of like, I don't have the answer. People ask me, who are you? What do you do? And it's like, I don't answer. And I just stand and say, what do you need me to be today? Isn't that the answer?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it's where the question comes from is always interesting to me, rather than the question itself.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, a lot of times, you know, when people will say, I can go in the room and I'll read the room, and then you'll go to people that you might be guided to. Now you're going to the person that you want to be able to use that Rolodex in your head, like an avatar, and saying, let's connect on this little disc card in our brain, right? Yeah. Well, I think, Thomas, too, your book, The Karma Factor, it's truly about being able to say, how can we exist today? You know, right in the beginning, I underlined the very first words you wrote in the book, this work could remain pure. And I was thinking about that, and I'm going, what is that about? Is that devoid of trouble, of mind, of society, of the human story, of the way things were, of eons of fragments? What is the word pure all about? Because in total contrast, to look at your title, The Karma Factor, we're thinking, well, that's all fragments of blah, 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 you know? So, in essence, how is that contrast played out in your stories?
Well, I don't see them as contrast. That's the first thing. It's like the fragments are pure. It really has to do with where the story comes from, the consciousness that births the book, the story, the music, the whatever. And there are lots and lots of temptations and false gods and false images and identities that present itself. And you're thinking, oh, will this sell? Or, you know, what demographic am I? All these thunderstorms of ideas and thoughts and conflicts can come up. And every writer has to, you know, at least from my humble, come to terms with the cacophony that gets introduced when you're trying to just tell a story. And I have been able, I've been so fortunate this lifetime. I've been so that I have basically kind of what you were saying earlier in our little talk beforehand about remaining an outsider. And it wasn't by choice. It was just, that's where it was. And I grew up in a very, very academic family, Harvard, Yale, PhDs galore. And then there was me. And I had to find it elsewhere. But I never, you know, my entire working life, I worked for myself. I sold stuff on street corners. I did, you know, waiter tables. I did dishwashing. I did construction. I did anything and everything, and ended up, you know, working for one person for 6 months. Or other than that, it was all self-generated income, because all I wanted to do was be Tom Lane. And that was a full-time occupation for me. Yeah. But it kept that, back to the purity thing, the fact that I didn't have liens on me and my consciousness and who I was and who I wasn't. And I failed miserably in terms of music. I did rock and roll. I had bands. I had this, I had that. And I sort of just, you know, got off the grid because I didn't want to play the rock and roll game or become part of these various groups, because I wanted to keep that vision authentic. Let's use the word authentic rather than pure. And so, you know, I was able to do that, I think, and I still have learning to go, and I will keep writing and hopefully getting more and more to that. But I don't struggle. I struggle to find words. I struggle to find note, but I don't struggle with personality and is this going to sell or not sell or whatever. And I have been able, largely because of positive circumstances, but also a lot of work on my part, to stay authentic through the process.
I think also, too, as we look at it in the year 2023, there's a lot of people who are called forerunners. I know myself, I feel like I'm a first in line. I've said to many times, I felt like I'm going with a sickle through the jungle, you know, and everybody's behind me. And you wrote in your book, a few sensitives around the globe, however, gazed warily at the phenomenon and took note. And I know that's part of a story that you're talking about in your novel, The Karma Factor. However, also, too, if you look at it, sensitives as we are, we have been in observation mode this entire lifetime.
Absolutely.
And we are here on a mission. You know, I look at it so many times, people would say something and they would say about my life or whatever, and I would say my life is a mission.
Yeah.
I'm here in purpose. So they'd say, well, why did you do that or whatever? And I'd say it's part of the mission. Not even knowing what or who I am saying it. It just shows up. And I think if we can understand that, then things will start to fall in place like a bicycle chain, do you think?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, do you think everyone buried maybe beneath all kinds of layers has a mission, is here for a specific purpose? Do you find that?
I find that because, you know, when they say, like, people are killing or why is this violence here, and I'll say perhaps they are there for a reason for themselves, but maybe for others. So I think we may have many missions within our essence, but it also depends upon, don't forget, I almost see this year as people will say it's here for the I, the me, the whatever, you know, or maybe you, like these just singular people. When in essence, if you think of the soul as an eternity, you know, eternal factor, it's got all kinds of past lives, future lives, and everything that have kind of all of a sudden, we turned on the headlights. And now we're looking at all of them. And we're going, what the heck, you know? So we're kind of all in a quandary, so to speak.
That reminds me of the past lifetime phenomena. One of the things that I have found amusing and unfortunately not as true as I'd like it, if we consider that we have many past lifetimes and we are black in one lifetime, white in another, we are a king, we are a burglar, we are a heinous personality, we are a glorious personality, we're a Democrat, we're a Republican. You'd think if that was that perception was open up, we could walk in each other's shoes a lot more easily. Oh yeah, I've been a woman, sure. I was black. Yeah, I was homosexual. Whatever it was. It just in terms of the tribal problem that we seem to be having.
Right. But I think if you look at it, remember when we went through that door to the next lifetime, the human story fell off. While we might recognize it and we see it in reflection,
I feel it's there to be viewed. I really do.
Right,
That's been my experience.
Right. I mean, because I live in New Orleans. I can go on any street and I could pick up my past life. I've been here for eons. You know, my house, you know, that I had in the 70s, I would go down the street and I would see myself walking in the boats and the ships going down the Mississippi River. You know, and I was a girl with, you know, a parasol. I would walk down in, you know, the city, and I was a little black boy, and I knew the year, I knew what my name was and my story was, and that was in 1867, you know. So I feel these and I know these. They seem to come up, and they will tell you the whole story if you converse with them. However, I think really the catch is, Thomas, is that I've seen people in these spiritual stories, and they'd say, oh, that's what that means. And then they will attach to it and bring it into this lifetime as part of this lifetime, and it's not. Like where people will say, oh, well, I must have been a king in the past lifetime, and they will start dressing like them. They will start talking like them. They will change their name, you know what I mean? They will only seek out others that they believe were part of that tribe. And that can be a pretty dangerous thing in a way, don't you think?
I do. That's what they do with that. Those become identities that are false. It's not the fact that all I was saying is that it's there to be viewed and whatever. But and in some cases I have found it helpful. I went, that explains this thing that I'm still enacting. But then I drop it. It doesn't. I'm not trying to be that person anymore. God knows. But that's why you get rooms crowded with ex-Cleopatras and King Arthurs, and
that's right, yeah,
all that kind of stuff, and it's just the ego at play.
But don't you think also too, Thomas, in your book, the character James, when we look at it and these things start to happen, he doesn't take it on as ownership. Do you know what I mean? When things start to shift, it's sort of like, oh, okay, and then continues the story to see how it plays out. It doesn't take it on as, oh, well, I have to go and know the reason why, who, what, when, where, why of the whole thing, and then stick that badge on my wetsuit. I don't find that at all in your book.
Oh, well, he is drawn back. He goes back in a kind of a dream thing and re-experiences what it is. And it becomes, and then he has a question. He looks at himself in the mirror when he's back in present time, or at least for the present time of the book. He looks at it and says, no, I'm not a Tibetan monk. I'm not a this. I'm a New York. He's trying to separate himself from that.
Yes.
And he does war with it. And then eventually he incorporates the wisdom, the good, not that he's going to go back there or whatever, but there was things that were blocked from his memory. So he gained from the experience, but he didn't, I think what you're saying, he didn't try to then sit cross-legged in the NYPD police department and chant. He did not. He put his gun on his belt and went out.
Yeah, but also, too, I think the most important part of your character was that he also didn't take on the identity of his position and his job. He knew it was a job.
Yes.
Too.
Yes.
Do you know what I'm saying?
He learned.
In other words, it wasn't the core of his soul. He knew that his soul was so much more. That's why I think the book, The Karma Factor, is talking about who or what is your soul spirit.
Yes.
And can you see the stories that play around it as a circle?
Yes, he leaves the NYPD for exactly that reason. And he thinks he can be more helpful as an independent, now becoming more and more self-aware and of the various things. And he also, he's in competition with the police, because if the police find the bad guy, they're not going to be able to help him really get to the source of the problem, the criminal. And so he's trying to outwit his former identity as a police officer to do this spiritual work with the suspect.
I truly think that many people are finding that within their professions now. You know, we're post-pandemic and people are saying, I don't want to do that work anymore. But they're taking the aspects of who were what they were, and they said, I know. I want to see the other side of the coin. I know with my son with the suicide and his addictions and stuff, he flipped the coin, and now he works with kids who are in jail, who are in trouble, and are doing really bad things in life, to tell them about life is valuable. So the idea is, can we take the coin and now flip it and say, but we are different than this. That's the story. We are more.
Yes, it's so beautiful about your son. I'm sorry it was such a painful track, but the fact that all is well that ends well. Oh my God, that's beautiful.
But even he and I, we always say this all the time, but that was what it was supposed to be. I think sometimes if we could just say, oh, okay. When I share my story sometimes, this was about 15 years ago, someone said to me, oh, I'm so sorry for all your suffering. Do you know I had to pick up my iPhone and say, Alexa, can you define suffering? I didn't know what the word meant because my stories and my experience had not touched to the point where I had to drag them around like baggage behind me that was stinking. You know what I mean? I just didn't need them. And when we share our stories, just as you and I and your characters in your book, when you share your stories, it's important to understand that others will say, oh, and it will unlock something inside of them for their own story. So when we share stories and we ask people to go through on an adventure like your characters in the book, that's about to be able to open something up inside of you so you would find your own way just by saying, oh, I'm free to be open. Isn't that what we want, as others to say, do you mean that there's a different way? I don't have to be that way?
Yeah. I have a personal metaphor of that. The way most of us conduct our lives is that we live in this glorious mansion, but we stay in one room in this glorious mansion. We don't entertain the possibilities of that there are other rooms that have different corridors and different waveforms, et cetera, and just opening up. The first step is just being open to the possibility, and I would like to think that art does that. As a matter of fact, I know it does that. Really good entertainment can change your mood, but great art will change your life. And I really mean that, and because it happened to me. I was listening to Bob Dylan way back, and all of a sudden the lights went on. That completely changed the vector of my life at that point.
Isn't that a time when we say there is a shift? We make a choice, something in us is lit up, something in us closes down, something in us will just be able to shift. And when that shift happens, we are on perhaps maybe within the same collective society or whatever. However, we have changed our trajectory.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's if it, to frame the mission that I'm on, it would be impossible. But I think it has to do with opening doors, with looking at possibilities, and just to have the intention that is bumped up a bit to look at possibilities of something different, something better, something that could be wonderful.
Yeah, let's talk about that when it changed trajectories. I look at it myself. You share it in your book, and it's almost as if you could hear the whoosh go by, or it's almost like a tsunami, or it's almost like a slamming of a steel door, or it's almost as if all of a sudden you can't see, and then when you do open your eyes, it's like you can't adjust your vision. I know I've had several experiences in my life, and one time I was in court for my divorce, and I gave an answer that they asked, and boy, did I hear it. I mean, the words came out of my mouth. It was what I was supposed to be guided to say, but when I said it, I knew the trajectory was totally altered forevermore.
Right.
Don't you think when you hear those, you say, I understand, and it'll be okay? Yeah.
I mean, I had a few of those back when I was, late teens, and all of a sudden, I mean, it was so deep, it was so complete, that it ruined me for any kind of quote-unquote normal life, and, I went from there. But it was, I will never be the same, and I knew that right there, when I had the experience. And then it took me years to settle into that. I had to it changed immediately, but how it was going to work itself in a lifetime, surrounded by people who had completely different thoughts and ideas about what it meant to be alive, and that took a lot of time and to work through. But it happened, just as you say.
But do you think perhaps, just as you share in your book, you say it was more about the looking than the finding. Do you think in essence, if we look at that, what you just said, when you said about it shook you and whatever, it wasn't about the story of who you were and to get back to normal or to get back to a new essence of who you are, because you were always the same. It's just now the story that's like resonating with you as a frequency, the print is changing on the pages. So the you was always there. It was just the printing on the pages was shifting.
Well, it was let's call it a storyline of who I was and what I could expect. And then I had something completely unexpected, some experience of how I process being alive. And then what took time is the storyline was very embedded, as I think it is for most of us, of, family and growing up and grandchildren and it took me a long time to let go of the former storyline and not put a new storyline in there, just the I am in there.
Right.
And that, for me anyway, that took work, and that took time and experiences to process that.
But that's really what your character is doing in the book.
Yes.
Because for every event that is happening, he's like stepping back and just, it may take him out. He might be on the streets. He might be out of touch. He might be totally out of body, so to speak.
Yeah.
But when that happens, that's when you pull back all your tentacles, so to speak. Don't be the octopus, reaching out in the earth, for validation from everybody. Pull yourself back in and say, woof, I need to reset. What is this all about? Isn't that what your character's all about?
Yes. And sometimes, not to give the story away, but the phone rings and he picks it up and it says, "Hi, Mom." And she's going, "Ooh, you have changed. You picked up just out of the ether that it was her calling." And he wasn't even aware of it. It was just this becoming a normal new perception that he had, that he was starting to pick up on people's thoughts. But it wasn't like, "Oh my gosh, look at me." It was like, "Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, you're right,
Yeah. Yeah. And also, too, about knowing, when you have criminals, we're not giving away any of the story. We're already just talking stories. But your character, as being the cop, it kind of can see people for something more than they are, but also something less than they are. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I think that's truly important, because sometimes we say, well, maybe this is just what they're acting out, or maybe they're on a mission, or maybe it's something to show me, or whatever it is. But the answer is, we're in the here and now. How do we have an effect on this moment in time?
Yes, even the bad guy, Mr. Malcolm.
Right.
Once that my detective has crossed that threshold of into other realms of perception, he realizes that the only way that a bad person can be truly healed and will not want to do those things anymore is for them to have an awareness, a realization about who they basically are, who they really are. And that then, as opposed to putting the guy in jail or killing him, executing him for the crimes, and in this paradigm, he would then come back the next lifetime and do it all again, and maybe with a little more fury because of what happened. And this time, early, nails him down so the guy will consider that, that there's someone else locked away inside him that is a different stroke.
Let's also talk about your character. When the tribe around you starts noticing something's going on with you, and they want to, quote, lock you up, put you out to pasture, say something's wrong with you, or how about this one answer is they said, go talk to somebody, there's drugs for that, And you look at it and you go, how can I hold myself in my space versus being willingly giving up myself to someone else to fix in that lower vibration?
I think it has to do with confidence, that you have some belief in one's own capacity to heal, to be healed, and that they have the capacity either to get help from another or help do the right thing for themselves, or a combination, whatever works. But without that, then you don't have any core from which to push off from. You know what I mean?
Right. You know, but I also think, too, Thomas, your book, The Karma Factor, the stories that we've shared, you know, over a decade of my radio shows, many other people's writings and books, truly is saying we are all having these experiences at this time.
Yeah.
And not to be afraid of them. So there may be a part of the collective that is still stuck in the old stories and the old truths and the old tools, but we are the forerunners who are saying, here's a different tool, here's a different story, here's how you can rewrite it. Yes, I've had that before, or, oh, man, isn't that cool? I'm going along that paradigm. And that's what your book, The Karma Factor for a Summer Read, is saying. Hey, have you had this before? What's this about? What's the story about? And it's going to be okay. You can follow a different path. Isn't that what we're proposing?
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Well spoken. That would be the great product that I hope that this book can help open those doors that you're talking about, and just a sigh of relief that there are other ways of viewing this thing, and there are people out there doing this kind of work, and this is a moment. Roll up the sleeves, you know, take your next step.
Yeah, because really, you know, it's not like you could sit down, you know, to lunch with your girlfriends, because if they've all been in the same paradigm, in the same space, it's just like when you want to give up drinking and everybody's still drunk, you know, it's sort of like there's going to be a push and shove.
Yes.
So the idea is, do you still keep going with them and listening to their drunk stories, or do you find some other way or some other thing to do? And it's really about being able to say, do you know how big the world is? You know, I look back at it, Thomas, and I'm almost 70, and I think of life before, you know, when I grew up in the 50s and 60s. It was the corner library, the old books. You know, they had been there forever. You know, we might get 10 books, you know, new a month. And that's what we believed was the way it was. All my relatives, you know, for decades lived within a 1-mile radius, you know. And now we're scattered across the country. We've got the Internet, and we can just ask Alexa, hey, answer my question. What's this about? And the intuition of the Internet will help guide you. So I think the idea is the world as free as we think it is? The answer is yes. Can a human shift and have other experiences outside those old dogmas and paradigms? The answer is absolutely. And what's the choice? The choice is listen, open, share, and just jump off the ledge and see what's going to catch you. Do you think?
Oh, yes. And, you know, when you were talking a little bit earlier, I was thinking that what you know, I as I mentioned, I was raised very academically, and it was just not for me. And I was full of play and mischief and boyishness and sports and all that stuff. And then I began losing ground in terms of just the world that was not so pleasant. And what saved me was when my fourth grade teacher started reading The Hobbit out loud to the class. And all of a sudden, there was this other world of magic, of heroes that were like 4 feet tall with furry toes, you know? And that were humorous and also strong. And anyway, it just presented a whole nother thing. And so, you know, the fact I was open for that kind of information to whisk me away and let me know that the possibilities were there and ready.
Yeah. Don't you think, Thomas, also, too, being a New York cop and having the dreams of being a monk is really saying that there's so many ways of being a human on this lateral paradigm, and that we all have value?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, his best friend, Sam, is just a wonderful person. And Early, the detective, loves him very much, and when he leaves the force, he feels he has betrayed his friend, his best friend. They were his partner. They were in this together. His partner was very concerned when Detective Early started having a meltdown, and he breaks into tears. But ultimately, and the detective said, I can do better for this particular mystery that we're trying to uncover as an outside source who's playing with all the different possibilities. So but the role that the other cop played was huge. His kindness, his decency, his tears for the loss of his bud.
Yeah. There's so many different levels of human existence. We get stuck in the one that we want to feel like it validates us, and when we get outside of that, it's almost as if we feel like we are dissolved. We're not that person anymore. People say, you need to go back. Who are you? I don't know this person anymore, or you don't fit in. We've all heard that one eons and times ago, Yeah. And I think sometimes people will say, but that broke me. And I've always said, that did not break you.
Yes,
that broke the vision and illusion of what you thought you were.
So now
you're no longer living from this outside paradigm. Now it's time to find out who you really are made out of.
Yeah, and this time right now is the time to take that leap, because we need leapers all over the place. As I've articulated before, I think it's all hands on deck, but there are also a million different kinds of decks. There's just because you don't want to be an activist and go out there with signs and march and whatever doesn't mean that may not be the deck that you're hitting. There are other ones. Being nice to the postman, being a little nicer, taking your kid for a walk to talk. Whatever it is that person's reasons, raison d'etre, purpose, whatever, or just wanting to be a decent human being, which is a glorious thing, can be, to do that.
Also, Thomas, in closing, do you think that we can start to be freer and let go of our story? In other words, I would hope that if we are eternal and we come back in the next lifetime, we will say that story has dissipated, lost its energy, and no longer shows up in my rearview mirror. Might we become more eloquently and more driven to let these stories go this lifetime?
Yeah, they're kind of a substitute for living. If you lean on them and depend on them, they're not in present time. And present time is, as one person said, the past and the future are fiction. Present time, that's real. That's the real thing. And so, all those kind of what I'm calling storylines, identities, whatever, if you huddle up on that and work from that, you miss out on all kinds of other possibilities for being alive and different pathways.
Yeah. I think it also comes with age. As so many times people will say, I'm in the last third of my life. And things are very different. It's sort of like, I know for myself, usually I would buy I love those pants. I'll probably wear them in the next few years. And I caught myself and said, I'm only going to wear them today. That's it. You know what I mean? I'll wear them today. And if I don't wear them today, then I'm not going to buy them because I'm
Good
not,
point.
Everybody says, I'm not sure if I'm going to be here, And I think a lot of times people are becoming more freer with that concept. Nothing is promised past today's breath of life. Perhaps?
I agree with you. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Thomas, it was such a pleasure to have you with us today to dance through the ethers as we speak. And what it truly is about saying we know these words are out there. These concepts and thoughts about life are starting to show up in ways in which our world is showing us to exist in is really taking a shift. And when you really took the stories of your characters in this novel, The Karma Factor, and you really put them down and said, this is how this is playing out, and meshed them together, I think it's really a great read for people to say, I can understand this, perhaps.
Oh, thank you. Well, that was the intention. as a singer, I know, and a performer, I know when I was out there performing, that in the crowd of 20 people, and I would make eye contact as I sang songs, there was probably one or two I could see really tracking with the song, really there, getting it, and that was it, and that's all I cared about. So if this book can bring a handful of people to want to engage more fully, more authentically in life, oh my God, what more can I ask for?
Yeah. It's also about being able to say we don't need to save, rescue, or fix people. We're just really looking for someone to walk alongside of us. And that's what this book is. It says, hey, come walk alongside me. We're not scary. We're not bad people. We're just evolving, right?
There you go.
Absolutely. Well, Thomas, can you share with the listeners how to find out more information about your work? That would be wonderful.
Let's see. Well, I have a website, which is thomaslane.com. It's there functioning. I'm about ready to put a lot more stuff in there. I've been advised that, load it up with goodies. So I have paintings and poems and articles and, stuff about the book. And I have an album under the name of Tracker, a CD called Hotel Earth. And just lots of fun, lots of goodies. And that's probably the best way.
Very good. Well, Thomas, it was such a pleasure to have you with us. We thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your wisdom and your story and your great novel.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been really fun, really educational. I'll think about it, what was said and what you talked about. And thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. If you'd like to find out more information about Thomas Lane, again, the book is The Karma Factor. Please do click on the link on the bottom of today's show page to go directly to his website for more information. And do check back often, as he will be adding more information, more goodies, and more information to be able to engage in. And it truly is about being able to say this is not a scary thing. We are all going through it at different levels, different times, different phases. Everyone has their own thread in creating this new tapestry called the New World. The New World. And it truly is about being able to say it's going to be okay. We're not using that thread and saying we're going to be cut off. We're going to be stuck. We're not going to have anyone to support us. Everyone is weaving it all together. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher, and until tomorrow, have a great day.
Today we discussed many life-changing concepts. Who do you turn to, and how do you know what is best when faced with a health crisis? Dr. Jeanette is a patient advocate. She listens to the patient, the doctors, and the family, clarifies the health issues and concerns, then helps the patient make the best choices going forward. If you would like help implementing change into your life and health, we can talk and see where you are stuck and how to improve the quality of your life. Check the link on the bottom of today's show page or visit dr-jeanette-gallagher.com to schedule a phone appointment today.